Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, fellow readers. Welcome to the 5th day of the Festival of Storytellers. I hope you're enjoying the wealth of authors that are available to you to check out their people and their books. I'm hoping you're having a good time and you get to do it from the comfort of your home. I'm one of them. My name is Steve Sears, Stephen D. Sears. I'm the author of In the Beginning, A Consideration of Genesis. So most of your authors have written many books. A lot of them are telling either a story of their lives or story of their own invention. What I have is the story of Genesis. And so this is my take, my analysis of what's going on in Genesis. So far, I've had 4 sessions. I've talked about how I came to write the book, a little bit about myself. I've talked in general terms about what it was I tried to do in writing this book. Yesterday, I talked about the 12 things you need to know when reading Genesis, which has talks about general concepts, general characteristics of what you're going to see when you read through Genesis. Today, I want to talk about one of those characteristics, which is the character of Abraham, who stands like a colossus over the whole book. So I'm going to focus in on several events that he's a part of that show how he gets along with his neighbors, how he manages to live in peace, even though he's an alien. He lives as an alien the whole time he's in Genesis. I'm going to start by reading I feature Abraham as one of the 12 things you need to know. I'm going to read what I've written about that as a kind of introduction. And when I finish, I'm going to read, when I finish part one ends with the death of Abraham, and then it moves on to Jacob and the rest of his family. But before I moved on, I wrote sort of a summary of Abraham, and I'll read that toward the end. Now, Abraham comes on the scene in chapter 12 of Genesis. In my book, he comes in at chapter 5, but chapter 5, I spend the whole chapter not on Genesis, but what other books give us as to what his life in Ur looked like and the archaeological evidence of what Ur and Haran looked like as cities and what the places in Canaan looked like that he was moving to. So that'll happen on Monday, and I've got some other interesting topics coming up for next week. So I'm going to start by reading my sort of intro to Abraham. So here is how I summarize him at the beginning of my book. We now come to Abraham, the one person who stands above the discord, strife, and misunderstanding seen everywhere else in Genesis. Abraham takes up more than 25% of Genesis, more than any other character. Abraham stands like a North Star in the new embryonic relationship between humans and God. We will spend much of our time looking at Abraham and how he led his life with his family and neighbors, how he made his decisions, and what values inspired and directed his life. Here are some of the features we will examine in the life of Abraham. From the time we meet him all the way through to his death, Abraham lives everywhere as an alien and an outsider. He was born in Ur, but never goes back there. Despite spending the entire book of Genesis as an outsider, he always finds a way to get along with his neighbors. Genesis is very specific in describing how Abraham does this. We will examine this closely as it gives us a blueprint about how we can all live with each other, even the alien and the outsider in our midst. Abraham has an unbreakable, fiercely loyal relationship with Lot, the nephew of Abraham's early deceased brother Haran. Lot and his family are with Abraham when Abraham leaves Ur with his father Terah to go to Haran, then travels with Abraham to Canaan, then accompanies Abraham to Egypt, and then goes back with Abraham to Canaan, and only splits up when their households become too big to be supported by the land. Abraham rescues Lot and his family from capture by the kings opposing Sodom, and later bargains with God to save Lot from the coming destruction of Sodom. Perhaps the only bond greater than theirs in the whole Old Testament was the one between David and the king's son, Jonathan. Abraham's greatness is always seen in reflection in Genesis. We see it in how God blesses Abraham with wealth and devoted followers, and how others speak about and treat Abraham. Abraham has a great unbreakable relationship with God. Abraham is totally obedient to God. Every time God tells Abraham to do something, he does it. Not only does he do it, but he does it right away. When we were reading through Genesis, we began to call Abraham by the nickname immediately, since every time God tells Abraham to do something, he immediately does it. Abraham is always totally obedient to God. But in turn, throughout Genesis, God watches out for Abraham. Despite having no male heirs, so a servant of my household will be my heir, says Abraham to God. God promises Abraham a son coming from his own body. Quote, Abraham believed the Lord and he credited to him as righteousness. This is the first great covenant made between Abraham and God. And unlike most other covenants made between God and his people, which were never kept, Abraham always kept this covenant. From all time since, this first covenant with God, based on Abraham's unquestioning faith with God, would make it so, have stood as the epitome of what faith in God should look like. We are all bequeathed it through Abraham. Abraham always understands that in dealing with people, the relationship is always more important than the decision, outcome, result. We will examine many instances of Abraham's applying this principle in his many dealings with his neighbors and his family. As the eternal outsider, this principle always stands Abraham in good stead. Abraham always exhibits great loyalty to his family and to the others in his household. This total loyalty shown back by his family and even servants and extended non-family household to Abraham often is what impresses the natives of places Abraham lives as an outsider. One of the great examples of this is when Abraham dies, who comes to bury him? Isaac and Ishmael. Yes, Ishmael, the son sent packing with his mother Hagar by Sarah. How could this possibly have happened unless Abraham had kept in touch, watched over, and distantly supported his other son? Abraham never compromises his principles. We will look at many examples of this. Many times when dealing with his neighbors, he will insist on paying them full value for something or taking only the minimum needed. He has opportunities to take more or take more advantage, but explains that it is not inherently right, he will not do it. He usually refers to his relationship with God and what that means as his reason. So people always see God underneath all Abraham's fair dealing. Abraham is never afraid to humble himself to God and the people with whom he comes in contact. We see this often in his dealings with Sarah, in his dealings with Lot, with his dealings with his neighbors, and with his relations to God. Abraham never makes himself more important than other people, and especially never more important than his personal God. So we start, it starts, most of what we've seen so far, we're going to look at that. Thanks for the comment. So most of the things that have so far happened in Genesis start with, this is an account of, this is an account of. When we get to Abraham, it says, the Lord has said to Abram. Well, that's typical, because with Abraham, it's always about him talking to God and God talking to him. This happens over and over again. So Abram leaves Haran when he's 75, never to return. What happens? As soon as he gets to Canaan, oh my God, there's a famine. So he consults some of the party he has, some of his counselors, and they decide to go to Egypt. Well, he's a human being. Good. More comments. Great. So he goes to Egypt, but he has no power. Pharaoh is the most powerful person. Turns out Sarah is unbelievably beautiful. He fears for his life. So he tells Sarah, pretend you're my sister. Well, Pharaoh finally finds out. He throws him out. But because he thought Abraham was her sister, they've been living in comfort with Pharaoh. And so when Abram leaves, he goes back to Canaan, but he's more wealthy because of that short relationship with Pharaoh. So the first thing we find when they get back to Canaan, this is, again, another thing I had never remembered reading. He and Lot realize that now they're both so wealthy in animals, in things that need space for grazing, that they can't continue to live together. So they decide they need to separate. So they discuss this. They're discussing how should they separate. So Abram says, well, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between our herdsmen and mine. So basically, they look at the area they have, and Abram says, well, we can go one way. So he lets Lot pick. Lot gets to pick where do they go. So guess what? This is how specific Genesis is. Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the Garden of Eden. So he picks that one. So he picks the area that's near Sodom and Gomorrah because it's well watered, it's a plain, it has better pasture land. And Abraham goes up west of the Dead Sea to an area that's hilly and probably not quite so good. Now, I argue in the book, part of what happens when he does this is that Abraham is basically telling Lot, you're now doing well enough to stand on your own. You no longer have to be part of my direct family. He's basically showing confidence that now, even though they'll live near each other, they don't have to live together. Lot is now doing well enough that he can stand on his own 2 feet. So, not long after this comes this crazy situation, which I call Abraham going to war. This is yet another story that I never knew was in the Bible. The shorthand version of it is the kings that live, there's 5 kings that live south of the Dead Sea in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah. But there's 3 kings up in Mesopotamia that had taken them over and now we're requiring them to pay tribute because they were stronger. So these guys have been, yeah. Thanks for the comment. So, after so many years, the kings in Sodom and Gomorrah in their area stopped paying the tribute. So the 3 kings from Mesopotamia come down to with an army to basically take them back over and make them subjected to them again. So they go through all the countries to the east of the River Jordan. They eventually go south to where these 5 kings are. They give them battle. They defeat them. And so in defeating them, like most armies, they loot and they take as prisoners / slaves a bunch of the people from that area. So what's that got to do with Abraham? Well, in the process, they take Lot and his family. So now they're going back to Mesopotamia on the west side of the River Jordan. So they go somewhat past where Abraham's living, and one of the servants for Lot escapes. He tells Abraham about it. Abraham talks to his people, and they put together a rescue party. So this rescue party, which includes 3 friends that Abraham has made in that area, they go chasing after the winning army. The winning army at this point probably feels like, wow, we've defeated all the countries there. They're not really worried about anything. Abraham's party follows them all the way pretty far north, well north of Canaan. And at night, they sneak up, attack them, and put them to flight. And so in the process, Abraham and his party capture all the people that have been taken, and they take all the material wealth that got stolen, and they return. So here they are returning. Well, the kings, normally, if you won a battle, now you have power over these people. So the main king of the 5 kings comes up to Abraham, and he tries to make a deal. He basically says, give me the people and you keep the goods for yourself. Well, it sounds like a good deal. Here's what Abram says. I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men that came with me, his 3 friends. So Abraham refuses to stand over them. He's not going to change the power situation. He's letting them recoup all the things that they lost. He's accomplished what he planned to do, which was only to rescue Lot. But he's not going to change the power relationship. Everybody's still living in peace. So now we move on. We're going to move on to another situation he runs into. So further down, yes, good comment. So Abraham then moves to a place called Gerar, and he's living where a king named Abimelech lives. So Abimelech, and Abraham's doing pretty well, and Abimelech is worried about the future. So Abimelech comes to him, he says to Abraham, swear to me before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or my descendants. He's worried that Abraham might become too powerful and become in conflict with him or even supersede him. Show to me in the country where you're living as an alien the same kindness I have shown to you. And Abraham swears he will do it. Then Abraham says, we got this problem with a well. I dug a well and you guys have been trying to take it over. And Abimelech says, wait a minute, I didn't know anything about that. This is the first I'm hearing about it. So they talk about it and they come to an agreement. Abraham exchanges some goods. He gives Abimelech 7 ewe lambs. Abimelech says, what's this for? Abraham says, accept these 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well. So that's where it stands. He's not only assured Abimelech that he means no harm now or in the future, but he also resolves this problem and resolves it by not just trying to wheedle him down. He basically says, trust me, and I'm going to give you a pledge, some things to show that I will essentially pay for what I've just done. Let's see. Another instance we see, I still have some time here. This is really interesting. So at 127, Sarah dies. His wife dies. Yeah, another comment. Great. Good to see the comments. So at 127, Sarah dies. I'll talk more about what I think is really going on at this point. But Abraham now goes to bury her. So remember, this man owns no. Yeah, well, that's true. And there's more to it, too. So Abraham doesn't own any land. So he goes to the elders of that area. Again, they're his neighbors, but they're the people who are the natives there. He sits down with them and he says, he has an idea. He wants to bury her at this one place. So he talks to them, but he won't talk to the guy directly. He talks through as if he's not there. And he says, tell this guy I want to buy his cave so I can bury my people. Well, the guy answers him directly. He says, you're a great prince. You've lived here a long time. What's this cave to me? Just take it. Go ahead and take it. Abraham says, no, I want to pay you the fair value for it. Tell me what you think it's worth. So the guy calls him back and he says, where do I find it? He says, well, what's it to me? But it's really worth 400 silver shekels, which the commentary says was a ridiculously inflated price. Guess what? Abraham says, fine, and he pays it right then and there. He doesn't haggle him down. And by the way, in addition to buying the cave, he also buys the field, which requires him to pay higher taxes, which again, Abraham doesn't argue about it. He does it. Once again, we see that Abraham doesn't care about what the price is, what the outcome is. He cares about the relationship, and he makes sure the relationship stays well. The last thing I want to mention is the death of Abraham. Again, because we're going to see some more judicious actions by Abraham. So here's one. Here's another one I didn't know. Get what? Abraham, chapter 25. Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. And he has like 6 sons by Keturah. Who knew? Where was I when this happened? Hello? So Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. So here he is before he dies, setting things up so there can't be these kinds of conflicts that we see with David's sons, with Solomon's sons, where there's all these sons that fight each other, and there's this terrible family internacide that goes on after the dead. Abraham settles up with all of them. He sends them on their way away from where Isaac's living, and we have Isaac is now probably safer because Abraham has settled all these relations. He doesn't leave it for the for the heirs to figure it out, or for Isaac to figure it out. He's already settled it. So I still have a little time. I'm going to read the end. This is so the end of the first part. So here we go. But before we move on to the Jacob side of the Genesis story, let us take one last loving look at humanity's shining North Star, Abraham. We first meet him as he leads a life of urban luxury, first in Ur and then in Haran. He lives for the next 100 years of his life as a nomad and alien, always among strangers. He lives in tense and hostile and unfriendly climates and countries. Despite God's continuing promises, he never is blessed with many sons, and he never presides over any land, never mind lands as far as the eye can see. Despite what comes, he never loses sight of his one and great relationship with the God of all creation. Equally important, he never abandons his earthly relations. His living with his idolatrous father, Terah, until Terah dies, watching over Lot, and then at great peril to himself and followers, rescuing Lot, living in faith and obedience to his great wife and partner, Sarah, never abandoning his almost son, Ishmael, and always serving as the North Star to his son, Isaac, treating all servants and followers with humility and respect, and earning in turn their total devotion. He lives a very human life. He lives through famines, natural destructions, and a war. He seems almost constantly on the move for one reason or another. He has no earthly power and is often in fear of those with power. There are no miracles attached to his life. He founds no religions. He never identifies himself as a prophet or missionary, though others often see him as a prophet. He is strictly honest in all his dealings, especially to his neighbors. Despite all the conflict between Israel and Judah, with many neighbors, this is going forward. What we like to call the ites, the Edomites, the Ammonites, the guys they're always fighting with. That goes on through Joshua, Judges, Kings, and even all the Old Testament prophets. When we take a close reading of Genesis, we see through Abraham that it is possible to live in the Mideast with one's neighbors. Abraham does it, and he shows us in Genesis exactly how he does it. He is scrupulously honest, never takes anything more than he needs, never stands over any man he meets, and always understands that the relationship with each of his neighbors is always more important than any issue that might cause them conflict. He will give more than half, give more than necessary to keep in a right relationship. And Abraham always makes it work. So that's our quick look at Abraham. Well, Ethan Lee wants to know if I'm thinking of another book. Oddly enough, I'm thinking of writing a book on Revelation that would be similar in that it'd be sort of non-traditional, but it hasn't gotten very far yet. And biggest problem is trying to figure out what the heck's going on. But I got a lot of ideas. It's going to take a while to sort them out. But I've got a general plan about how to attack it. But so I wrote this book because I couldn't get to sleep over and over. Guess what? Thinking about all I wanted to talk about today, I was awake until 5:30 in the morning, which is why that's how I ended up writing this book, because I couldn't get to sleep. Anyway, so going forward, so let's see. I still have any time? I'm almost out of time. Well, again, this is my book, In the Beginning, Consideration Genesis. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon. It's $19.99 as a book, $9.99 as an ebook. Monday, I'm going to be on from 2 to 2:30 talking about the Abraham's prequel in Ur. Some of it will be about what sources say happened while he was there to cause him to leave, and what the archaeological evidence is for what these places look like. I spent a whole chapter on that, and it's really pretty fascinating. Not sure what I'm going to talk about Wednesday rather. Thursday, I'm going to talk about Judah and Tamar, which is a great story. And Friday, the last day of the festival, I'm going to talk about the 3 outsiders of Genesis. They would be Ishmael, Esau, and Joseph, because through them, they experience unbelievable treatment by their family members, and yet ultimately they forgive them and reconcile the breakage in those relationships, making them key people in the story, because all three of them are able to mend relationships despite what happens to them. Let's see, everyone can see. So I think I'm just about done. Wrapping up 2 minutes. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me. And I hope you'll enjoy the next week of this. The festival still goes on. Take care, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.